Welcome everybody to the Yalla Nahki podcast, a podcast created by ACS students for the ACS community. This podcast aims to embrace every voice in the community and bring the community together. So for the launching of our first episode, we're here with Mr. Kanjano, the head of the whole school. Mr. Kanjano, it means a lot that you're our first guest. It's an honor to have you.
I'm honored to be here, bud.
Thank you. So without further ado, let's begin with the questions.
Sounds good.
So the first question I want to ask you, so do you mind telling us where you were born and raised?
Sure. So I was born in Medford, Massachusetts, which is a town just outside of Boston, in a big Italian-American family. I'm one of 7 children, and my dad was one of 11 children. So we grew up in this kind of little Italian village, in a sense, outside of Boston, which was a very kind of nice way to grow up, and also kind of a limited way to grow up because we kind of were very family oriented and kind of stayed within our family.
So based on what I understood, you had Italian origins.
Yes.
From your grandparents, from
my grandparents. So my father is 100% Italian. His parents were immigrants from southern Italy, from the hill country outside of Naples. My mother is Irish. This was a very kind of common...
Diverse.
Yeah, but it was also a very kind of common combination. It was staying within Catholicism as a faith, so Italian Catholics would marry Irish Catholics or French Canadian Catholics, and all the Catholics kind of married each other. So diverse in that it was outside of Italian, but there was a lot of these mixed kind of ethnic marriages.
Do you know like a word or two in Italian?
Pardon?
Do you know like a word or two in Italian?
Yeah, a word or two, not much more, but I'm actually working on getting my Italian citizenship right now, so I'm hoping to be able to do that.
Can you tell us a word in Italian for the audience?
Buongiorno.
Yeah.
Prego, I don't know a whole lot.
You have the accent.
A little bit, not very good.
Do you believe like the beliefs you were raised differ from the ones in the ACS community, like the diverse community we have here, like when you first came here?
Yeah, it's funny. It's when I grew up in this kind of very family-centric situation. My parents were very had a very localized kind of viewpoint. They were not terribly cosmopolitan themselves. My dad and mother both were born and died in the same town. So they were born there, spent 80 years of their life in the same town and never really strayed from that. So their worldview was kind of shaped by that experience of being in that one town with their family. And I think my experience as a kid was very much determined or dictated by that. So it wasn't until I went to university.
Where did you go?
I went to Middlebury College, so a small liberal arts college in Vermont, which was perfect for me at the time. But it was at that point, which I think happens with a lot of kids, you go away from your home. Yeah. You're living with other people.
You're exposed to more stuff.
Exposed to very, not just a diversity of the population, but diversity of viewpoints. Which to me is the beautiful thing about university, is that you are exposed to all these different ideas and these different subjects that you never even imagined.
And you network with new people from different areas.
Yeah.
Did you feel uncomfortable when you first went?
Yeah, there definitely is a level of discomfort in going from, I went to kind of a big, I would say nondescript public high school, got a decent education, but not a great education. And I went to a pretty competitive liberal arts school where everybody was pretty talented as a student. So you immediately kind of see where you are relative to where other kids are. And other kids just had different kinds of educations in their high schools, a lot more emphasis on reading and writing and critical thinking, and we were more sort of rote memory kind of stuff. Like
did you cope? Did you do any coping mechanisms to like make you feel more comfortable, or like you just took time?
I went to a small school and I played sports there. So I immediately had a community that I was a part of. I played American football.
Yeah.
So being a part of that community and
felt belong.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people on the team were people like me from public high schools who were now at this university, and we had a lot in common with each other. So that was great at first because it gives you a network of people to give you that comfort, that you are part of a larger group. But it can be limiting too, because once you're part of that group, it's more difficult to kind of break out of it and make new and different friends. So it took me a while to do that. Because it was so comfortable, it took a few years to kind of start to branch out beyond that. And if you could do it over again, I think a lot of people feel this way, you'd probably do it very differently. You kind of look to break out earlier than I did when I...
It takes time, the process, to
it definitely takes time.
Go into uni and feel comfortable.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Do you think like embracing different beliefs, like for example, the ACS community can make the community stronger and make it each one feel belong?
I think so. I mean, I think the diversity of beliefs and the diversity of ethnicities and diversity of culture and diversity of religious beliefs. I mean, to me, that just enriches the experience that anyone is having. But it's important in that context to be open-minded.
Yeah.
If you're closed-minded, you're not going to get as much out of that exposure, out of those conversations. But if you're open-minded, you'll learn a lot about not just the other person or the other beliefs or the other people, but you'll learn more about yourself in the process. And I think that is enormously valuable. You end up probably being affected in ways that you didn't know you would be affected. And you end up becoming a somewhat different person by the time you're finished with that experience. And that, I think that's been true of every educational experience I've had. When you come out on the other side, when you're finished with it, you're very different from where you were when you went in because of what you've been exposed to the whole time.
Yeah, I remember also when I was in MUN, before I entered MUN, I was like very close-minded and aggressive to certain topics. But as I developed and now I became coaching students, I feel like when looking back, I realized how close-minded I am and how if you're more open, you can learn by understanding the viewpoints. So do you think that when you're a child, you were close-minded to certain topics and did you embrace this exposure?
For sure, because I think in my family, again, being an Italian, Irish Catholic family, and my parents were very religious, I grew up in that context. And I went to Catholic school, and I was an altar boy, so I did services in the church. So when you're growing up, that's all you know. And you just kind of adopt it, assume it, you believe what your parents believe. And in that sense, it is limiting. It's good. You feel like you're part of a community. It's tight-knit. You feel supported. You know what it is. But then when you're exposed to things that are different, you feel a little bit unanchored.
To adapt.
You feel like kind of untethered from what you know. And you're like, wow, I'm a little bit of a stranger here. But that just is an adaptation process too, you know? And I think I think about my brothers and sisters who still are in the Boston area. They are still pretty much, their worldview hasn't changed all that much because they really haven't geographically left or even, you know, in terms of...
They weren't exposed to other locations, Do you since you have a lot of siblings and do you believe there's pros and cons? I have one sister and it's enough. But do you have fights? Do you learn from those fights you had when you were small? Yeah,
you learn how, I mean, I'm the third of 7 kids, and I think and my dad was always stressed out all the time, so I just learned how to kind of get along with people. My mother was very even-tempered, even-keeled, and she was sort of the calm force.
She provides the emotion for the family.
Yeah, but she was also kind of lowered the temperature when things would get heated, when people were fighting or doing whatever. And I think I adopted a lot of her kind of traits and personality qualities. But it was also a survival strategy because when you're in a chaotic house of 7 kids and 2 adults.
You live to survive, basically, in the house.
Yeah, you're fighting for everything, for food, for attention, for the couch, for TV rights, all that stuff. So you learn how to kind of deal with kind of a constant state of, not tension, but you're always battling for something, you know?
Yeah. You're siblings at the end of the day.
Exactly. Yeah.
So moving on from that topic, we know from before that you're a teacher.
Yes.
So what made you go into the teaching field?
It's funny, when I started university, and this was my dad, who was very, very much a pragmatist. He wanted me to study something that would help me get a job, like every parent probably wants you to do. So I started off as an economics major, thinking I would go into business or banking or whatever. And I didn't like that. When I was at university, I just discovered...
You didn't feel it was you?
It wasn't me, for sure. I discovered I had a passion for literature. And then history too. So I decided to major in American literature. My father was like, what are you going to do with that? And I think I tried to force it by I worked for an insurance company after I graduated, which was also not me, but I had a job, so my father was happy. And so I was trying to kind of please my dad, but at the same time, I knew that it was not a good fit for me. Intellectually and professionally, it just wasn't a good fit. So after a couple of years, I made the decision to go back to school on my own and become a teacher. So I went back and got my master's degree, and that's what kind of began my teaching career.
So it's basically what you love doing that you'll feel most successful in, regardless the money aspect of it.
True.
Because when you love something, you can create new ways.
You figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
And I think to me, there was the intellectual part. I loved the literature and I loved history. So having a profession that allowed you to explore those topics in depth and to actually work with them every day was very attractive to me. But I also liked working with students. And that, I didn't realize just how much I enjoyed that until I actually got into classrooms. And once you start to develop those relationships with your students, first as teacher, but I also coached a bit, so then as coach and working with my players. And then I worked in a boarding school later, so I was a housemaster, so I actually lived with 30 boys for 9 years. You realize the complexity of the relationships that you can develop with kids that I hope enrich their lives, and they certainly enriched our lives. So it becomes kind of it's a really wonderful profession if you like all the things that can.
Do you think like you having a lot of siblings also made you like a factor of that role? Like you being exposed to like a lot of kids, maybe that made you love teaching. Maybe that made you love interacting with other people.
You know, I don't know if that did, because none of my siblings are teachers, and they probably don't have any desire to be. But I think it was something else. I think it was probably a bit of where I was coming from as when I looked back at myself as a student. Yeah. And I sort of went through the motions and got, again, I went to not a very good high school, so I got good grades without having to work terribly hard, and I wasn't really well prepared for university. So when I got to university, I felt like I was really quite behind in a lot of fundamental ways, and I was very self-conscious about what I knew or what I didn't know. And it was embarrassing to kind of write a paper and get a bad grade on it. And you sort of embark on this effort to try to improve yourself. Yeah. And I really, as I worked with kids as a teacher, I really I saw that because of my own experience, maybe I could help kids who were uncertain, who were self-conscious, who weren't confident as learners yet, to help them become more confident. You have that strong bond. Exactly. In whatever subject. Yeah. Because I think so many kids say, oh, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that, I'm not good at...
It's like deeper than that.
Yeah, and I think they can be good, and you can help people be good in something if you give them the right support and press the right buttons with them.
So now we know that you're not only the head of the ACS, you also teach the history...
Yeah, American history.
The American history class. So what made you take that role of teaching that class again?
I think it had been too long a time since I had been in the classroom. Yeah. I started my administrative career about 17 years ago, and I taught briefly an English course in Chicago when I was head of school there, but I missed teaching, and I missed teaching history. So I talked to Mr. Campana and said I'd be willing to offer a history elective, and he was keen to kind of add another course to the course catalog. So it was a great opportunity for me to jump back in and do it.
Did you feel like happier ever since you went back to teaching?
Yeah, it's been everything that I thought it would be on the positive side. Yeah. And it also kind of allows me to remember how challenging and difficult teaching is from a time preparation standpoint. So like I'm doing work at night again, like where I'm reading for the next day's class and grading papers and doing exactly. Yeah. And that's the stuff that's the most taxing part of teaching. But the rewards of working with kids in a classroom environment far surpass all of the effort that goes into it. And for me, being able to have those kinds of relationships, even though I only teach 12 kids, having the relationship with the 12 kids that I do teach has been just a real treat for me as head of school. And it's nice to actually know those 12 kids around campus and to have that kind of connection and relationship with them. So
you teach many of my friends, and they always tell me and tell like the other people in my grade, and that you have a different teaching style than most of the teachers. Like, how do you define your style, and like, do you think it's most beneficial compared to basic teaching methods?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I learned the most about teaching when I was a history teacher at this boarding school I worked at, which is also where my kids ended up going to school. And this was the kind of Harkness style of teaching you probably see in the classrooms that are set up like my classroom.
Yeah, it's like a round table.
The big kind of oval table. Yeah. And we all sit around the table. And in a sense, it's a little bit old school in the approach, in that it's very much a discussion-based class. Like I, as teacher, do not want to be doing most of the talking. It should be everybody kind of talking, interacting with each other and questioning each other and offering their own insights about things. But the key thing in that context, and this is where I think the kids had to make an adjustment, they have to come prepared to class. Yeah.
So they can do good conversations.
Exactly. Yeah. Because otherwise, what are we doing? I'm not just here to kind of put stuff on a board and say, you need to know this, you need to know this. Yeah. It's more like they've come prepared, they've thought about things, and then they're ready to have a conversation about it. And to me, that's when the deepest learning really does occur. Yeah. So it's not about memorizing facts and dates. We have to do some of that. but it's
To a
about
certain extent.
to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But it's really kind of tackling those kind of higher level issues or topics or questions that I think are most interesting to talk about and that really get kids thinking. But this setup of being around a table,
It's different than...
it's huge, and
yeah.
it means I can have a different relationship with the students, and they have a different relationship with each
Understand
other.
them more based on how they talk. Yeah.
Yeah, and just being in kind of close proximity and looking at each other, like there's nowhere to hide. Like you're all sitting around this table. So to me, the dynamic is very, very different. So maybe that's what your friends are experiencing, that it's just a little bit different
They like coming to their class. They feel like it's like a relief, and they can get to know like the perspective of their other students from learning.
No, it's good. I'm glad they feel that way because we're kind of doing this as a pilot. And if kids like it, then we might try to expand it into other classes too.
Do you also believe like it's the role of the teacher to not only teach like the notes, the subject, only also like life lessons outside the classroom? Yeah,
I think there's, I think that comes from having a nice relationship that goes beyond just the academic side of things.
Yeah.
So I in my career, both as a teacher and as a head of school, I've really tried to help encourage teachers to know their students, not just as students, but as people, right? It's this kind of, I know my student as a math student and what he can do or can't do or she can do or can't do. But what do I know about the person outside of class? Do they play sports? Are they involved in the plays or drama productions? Do they play an instrument? What are their interests? What are their hobbies? The more I know about them, the more that I can have kind of more broader,
stronger learning also.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's a fine line between sharing too much and everything else. And obviously, as an adult, you have to be careful about that. But I think when I understand the depth of students and what they're all about, it helps me when I'm working with them individually, right? So I think there's a huge benefit to be able to do that. In terms of life lessons, I don't like to preach about what to do or not to do, but it's more like if talking about my experience, you learn something from it. If you're interested in it, wonderful. If not, that's no big deal either. I certainly have learned a lot in my life, being as old as I am, but there's a lot that I don't know too. Yeah. So you're
every day we're learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Like since we're not going to use the term life lessons, was there a time like your mentor, your teacher taught you something, an experience maybe that you still carry out to this day? Yeah,
it was when I was in college. I got to know my literature professor pretty well, and I was still a little bit directionless. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And he was a guy who came to this small college in Vermont, and it's the kind of place that you sort of fall in love with, and he fell in love with it. He'd been there for years. And I mentioned something about wanting to be an apple farmer, because it seemed like, at the time, it just seemed like kind of a romantic thing to do. Stupid, but it just seemed romantic. And he encouraged me in that kind of that whimsical sort of thought. He said, I know an apple farmer, I'll introduce you to him and you can kind of see what it's like.
So you contacted the apple farmer.
Yeah, exactly. So but it was just that willingness to say, okay, I'm thinking about this. He probably knew it would never happen, but have this conversation. You'll learn something from the conversation, maybe you'll learn something about, exactly. So it's that whole idea of we always talk about getting out of comfort zones. And following your passions and all, and it was just his attempt to say anything's possible. Yeah, if you want to do this,
there's no specific answer.
Right.
Because every experience can vary.
Yeah, and you can take those experiences in different ways. So it's, I guess he just wanted me to think that there are possibilities in just about everything that you can do, and I think that's a hugely important lesson to learn, or something for students, kids to think about. Because I think so much of the time we think about our linear path. What are we going to do in our life and what do I have to do to get there? And I think I've realized, and my own kids have realized this, that life isn't like that. And your career isn't like that. And the way you live your life is not like that. It's very zigzaggy and can be
There's many obstacles along that linear path. There's nothing straight.
Exactly. And sometimes the obstacles can appear to really thwart what you're trying to do, but they could put you in a different direction. That could be more beneficial in some way. So there's a bit of fate here, but there's also kind of a willingness to sort of grapple with challenges that come along your way.
So being also a head of school and a teacher is very demanding. So how do you manage your personal well-being and your social life with setting deadlines for assignments and being the head of school?
I'm better at it now than I used to be. I think when I first became head of school, you're sort of if not overwhelmed
Yeah.
by the responsibilities of the position and the demands, you let yourself kind of fixate on them too much. And it does take you away from your family. I had 3 kids and my wife, and you realize that I looking back, I probably did get a little bit out of balance. And when I came here, I was determined, and I'm an empty nester now. My kids are older, to make sure that I maintain that balance. And my wife has been amazing in wanting to come here with
you
me.
need your loved ones to help you.
For sure, for sure. And I wanted to make sure that this experience was a good one for her too, and it has been. So I think just trying to be disciplined, you have to almost force yourself to kind of put yourself on a schedule where you're taking breaks.
And like
from
time
work.
management.
Exactly.
So like without time management, you probably cannot,
Right.
a person cannot manage all those stuff.
And you have to carve out time, to spend with, whether it's my wife or with friends or going for a run, like doing those things that you really want to do to keep you.
To like relax at some point. Yeah, but everything to a certain extent, like you have to maintain the sort of discipline.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like since ACS also places a strong role in like community involvement and like student leadership and like activities like the play and etc. What do you think also sets ACS apart from like different schools in the region and Lebanon? And like what's our role?
I mean, I've said this a lot, and I don't want it to sound trite, but this idea of community is something that I think we all take very, very seriously. And to me, whenever we're in kind of stressful environments because of academics, and as you go through high school and you start thinking about university, eventually your career, it's stressful. And getting good grades and all that other stuff. So to me, when you're a part of a community where you feel like other people know you and care about you, I think that's a differentiator for us. And I hope we are that community. I hope that students who are here, faculty who are here, feel that way. Like feel like this isn't just school, that this is almost a second home, almost like a home in terms of the relationships and experiences that we have here. And I've said it over and over again to students, and sometimes students heed this advice and sometimes they don't, but the more involved you are in doing the things that you like to do, but also, again, testing yourself and doing things that might be challenging for you, but the more you are involved in the life beyond the classroom,
beyond the academics.
The richer your experience is going to be. You'll get to know more people, you'll work with more people, you'll feel better about yourself. And if you're stressed out, you're going to feel more connected. And I think feeling connected.
There's a bigger picture than just like the grades and the assignments.
Exactly. And I think when you're focusing on that, you can feel isolated. You can feel like it's a battle, me against whatever. And I think when you have all these other things going on, they're not only healthy distractions, but they're community building too. So you're feeling like you're supported by your friends and peers and cohorts. And
how do you also guys in the administration work to ensure like that every student is comfortable and like more of us are involved in the community?
Yeah, I think we talk about it a lot, and I think we strategize about how to make that happen. And I think with our faculty and administrative teams, I think we have so many people who believe in that. It's just a question of, from a scheduling standpoint, from a messaging standpoint, how we can help kind of move these things forward. For me, being new 3 years ago, the one thing that I saw we were lacking that I hope we can fix soon is this idea of having a real big community space, a gatherings place, not the gym where we set up the chairs and do that. That's fine, but a fixed kind of community place.
Like a bigger lounge, for instance?
Well, I think more like an auditorium that would house the whole school, or at least the high school altogether.
Like what would that function as?
So it could be a performance space, it could be a meeting space, it could be guest speakers coming in, all kinds of things. And I know one of the things that we did at a previous school I worked at, we had community meetings twice a week. And they weren't long. They were like maybe 20 minutes, but the entire high school came in, 500 people.
Like a town hall.
Like a town hall, but it was just, and it was student-led. So the students would kind of help determine what was going to be on, and there were student speakers and student performances. But just the fact of coming together twice a week as a community really helped us build community too. And a lot of them were funny, a lot of them were serious. I mean, it was a really wonderful thing. I'd love to be able to do that here, to have this kind of fixed schedule.
Yeah, it's important also, like for a town hall, like those shows you watch where there's like the mayor in the town hall, like that also makes the citizens of the town feel more
participatory.
Yeah. As we're coming to a wrap of our final question, what advice do you give to the students that are in ACS, the new students, just like the whole community as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I think the advice I would give is the advice I always give, and that is, and it's what we just talked about, is you really need to try to get involved in as many ways as you can.
Yeah.
And I think the more involved you are at your school, the more fulfilled you're going to be. And I think when you're feeling more fulfilled, I think what you can accomplish is much greater than if you're not. And I think when students kind of adopt that philosophy or that strategy, I think their experience is so much better than it would have been. And I think they get so much more out of it. I think they have so many opportunities that they might not have otherwise had. And to me, that's what, when you finish that and you look back at it, you always want to be the one who says, I really did a lot. Like, I really accomplished a lot. Not the person who says, I wish I had done that, I wish I had done that.
Like, no regrets.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
trying everything.
Trying everything. And I think that the best part out of that is you meet more people and you work with different people. More than just your kind of immediate friend group, which is your comfort group.
Yeah, your comfort zone.
But getting about and working with other people that you might not know, maybe you didn't even know that you liked them, or maybe you didn't like them. But when you start working with them, you can have a completely different experience with them.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we're coming to a wrap of the first episode with Mr. Cangiano, we delved into life lessons of Mr. Cangiano. We got to know him even better, and we got to learn valuable advice from him. So, again, it's an honor to have you, Mr. Cangiano. I really enjoyed having you as our guest, and stay tuned for more episodes. Thank you.
Thanks, Basil. Appreciate it. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.